Hello babies, welcome back to the Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. I am hopeful you are watching as a patron on Patreon. It's only a couple bucks a month to get access to Pachter Factor on SIFTD and get it first. And we do between 40 and 50 episodes a year. So you're literally going to pay about 50 cents an episode to get it a week early. That just pays the production cost. So if you can, thank you. None of it's going to me. If you can't afford it, we get it. Please try to remember to link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account. That's $2.50 a month that you don't have to pay. Amazon will pay it, and I just looked up the numbers, and it's shocking how few people do that. It's easy, instructions below, so please try to remember. If you did do it once, you got to resubscribe. It's a single button click, instructions below. Our first question from YouTube, from Michael Ovalle. Do you think the next generation will be another landslide victory for PlayStation, or will it be a much closer race like with Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3? Keep up the great work, Pachter. Thank you, Ovalle. Realistically, the next generation should be smaller for both. We're gonna get streaming services and we're gonna get download services from more players. So, you're probably not going to require special equipment to play games. You've seen a migration of the game, design to kind of a PC game or PC language. I think you're going to be getting a lot more games that are PC and console. And so the PC version is going to end up being offered by Amazon and Microsoft and probably Apple and Google. And I think you're going to have the ability to play that game on your TV just by linking it to a device somehow. So, some type of Apple TV, Amazon Echo device, or some Bluetooth connection from your PC to your TV, which just means that you're not going to need a console necessarily to play the game. You will want a console to play the highest quality, highest definition version of the game. So if you want to play it in 4K at 60 frames a second, you're going to be able to. If you want to play it in 1080p at 240 frames a second, you're going to have to buy, probably buy a console to do both of those things. But truthfully, if you're okay with 1080p and 30 frames a second, you're probably going to be able to play with some kind of a Microsoft streaming device, Scarlett, or with some type of a Apple TV or Echo device. So do we really care whether Sony wins or Microsoft wins? Well, you asked the question. So the answer is, Sony probably wins. And the reason they win is not because Microsoft sucks. The reason they win is that the PlayStation 4 installed base is over twice as big as the Xbox installed base. So there's 92 million, as of this most recent press release, PlayStations out there. And Microsoft hasn't put a press release out in forever, but there's no more than 45 million of those. So, that you dance with the person who brung you. You stick with who you have an affinity for, and if you're a PlayStation owner, you really like PlayStation. So, for real, I drive a Porsche, and if I was going to buy another sports car, I'd buy another Porsche. So that's what PlayStation is. It's like you have a PS4, and the PS5 comes out, and why are you going to switch to Xbox? And you're not. So PlayStation has a 2-to-1 advantage. They're going to keep their 2-to-1 advantage. I think both consoles sell fewer copies, because the casual gamer who bought a late cycle PlayStation or Xbox this cycle probably just never buys one and goes with one of these streaming devices. And if you're a single player gamer, streaming is absolutely perfect. It'll work fine. If you are multiplayer, you're going to want to download the game because you're going to want, local CPU, GPU, the client. But again, I think you're going to see game sales go up, console sales go down, because we're going to have more alternatives on how to play games. Our next question from Patreon, from Jacques. The next console generation could be the last one for Sony and Microsoft as the industry moves to streaming. With Nintendo's continued commitment to handhelds, is it best positioned to compete in the future? Wow. That's a good question. I think that if we get to the point where all games come from the cloud, then think about it the way we think about Netflix. So Netflix is a cloud service, right? You don't need anything special to watch Netflix other than a screen and an internet connection. So if we truly get games that stream, why can't you play them on a tablet? And so why is Nintendo going to be, the best solution? There's a company called GameVice that makes controllers that fit onto tablets and fit onto phones. My understanding is that they are in litigation with Nintendo about the Switch controllers. But I know the GameVice guys, and they in fact did have that design and patented it prior to the Switch. So we'll see if they win their lawsuit. But why wouldn't you just buy a tablet, take a tablet you already have and attach GameVice controllers for a lot less money than buying a Switch and play your handheld games that way. So my bias is they all lose equally. I don't think that Nintendo dominates any more than it has so far. Nintendo's only saving grace, it's not the hardware, it's their software. So as long as Nintendo only puts Nintendo software on Nintendo devices, there will be a market for Nintendo hardware. But if everybody else, if Activision and EA and Ubisoft and Take-Two put their games on, in the cloud and you can stream to any device, why not play on your tablet? And if you can play GTA on a tablet and it's exactly the same game and it's streaming to you, why not? So I guess the answer is they all lose, and I'm not sure that it's the last console generation. I think that each succeeding generation from here is smaller than the one before because of the alternatives. Just like watching movies in the movie theater, there are fewer movie theater tickets sold ever since we had movies on television and movies on streaming, and in between all the VHS and pay-per-view and rentals and stuff. But the theaters still exist. So I think Sony and Microsoft will still exist. There'll still be consoles, but each generation gets smaller. Our next question from YouTube, from Victor Towers. Do you think a developer listening to the community and changing its game after launch is a good thing? It seems to work for Fortnite, but not so much for Destiny 2. This seems to be an ongoing trend for games as a service, but the community doesn't know what it's doing. And listening to fans can undermine the good work of developers. Thanks, and keep up the good work. Gamers seem to think that real life works like playing soccer when you're a little kid, that you get a participation trophy just for going out on the field and trying to find four-leaf clovers in the grass. And we have a whole generation of people who grew up thinking that their opinions matter. And the truth is, no, your opinion doesn't matter. Most of you don't have a right to have an equal opinion. I think the most interesting creative person ever on our planet, interesting, not the best, is Steve Jobs. And I remember when Steve Jobs came up with making the iPhone and having just the bottom button, no buttons on the phone. And everybody said, do you think consumers will like it? And he said, it's not my job to ask consumers what they want. It's my job to figure out what they want and then tell them. And I thought that was brilliant. He didn't ask anybody's opinion. He had a vision that we didn't want buttons on our phone. And I'll tell you the truth, I didn't have an iPhone generation 1 or 2. My first one was a 3. Because I was addicted to my BlackBerry, because the thing I did on my phone was email, and I like tactile buttons on my phone. So I was able to type fast with tactile buttons. And I laugh now because I type about 140 words a minute on a keyboard. But both of my kids type faster with one hand on a phone than I do, because my thumbs are fat and I can barely hit the wrong button all the time. So I freaking hate to type on the iPhone, but I have one and I'm on my 5th one or so, because it's got all the apps and I really, really like it. So Steve Jobs got me to switch because he figured out what I wanted and he told me. He didn't ask me. The answer to your question is, if you're a really good game maker, no, do not listen to the community. Give them what they want. Just figure it out before they tell you. And if you're really good, then selectively listen to the comments from gamers. and adopt the good ideas and reject the bad ideas. There's a saying, emulation is the sincerest form of flattery. I emulate best practices. And so I have changed 100 things in the last 18 years to be who I am today. And I doubt I'm going to work 18 more years. But if I do, I'm going to change 100 more things. If a good game developer has confidence that they actually are doing the right thing, they should tell the critics who tell them to change something that's wrong, that the critic's wrong, you're stupid, no. And they should embrace the good ideas and go, you're brilliant, yes. And so when you say it seems to work for Fortnite, not so much for Destiny 2, I'll tell you the developer that has gotten this absolutely right is Blizzard. When they launched World of Warcraft, you can look this up. That game got a 75 Metacritic score, as did Destiny 1, by the way. And I remember reading reviews on World of Warcraft and people were like, this game sucks and it's never going to make it. And I talked to a bunch of game reviewers who gave the game below a 75, who said, my God, I came back 3 weeks later, everything I criticized was fixed. So if I were a developer, I'd listen to game reviewers because those guys are professional. They actually understand what's good and what's bad, and what works and what doesn't work. I would not listen to players unless they came up with something clever. Our last question this week from Twitter, from @JacobDragon. In the past, Nintendo has generated revenue from separate handhelds and consoles. Does combining both into a single device with the Switch ultimately mean lower revenue? Many fans who have bought both a console and handheld now just buy one device. Yes. And the truth is, look, Nintendo, unfortunately, Nintendo is the best software maker on the planet, and they are the worst hardware maker on the planet. And whether you agree with that or not, they suck at hardware. And it's sad because they invented it. You know, they're the first successful hardware maker. And Sony passed them like they were standing still, and Microsoft passed them like they were standing still. And the Wii, as fun as it was crappy hardware, and the Wii U was really crappy hardware. But they're good at handheld. Instead of talking about how they're good at both, they've never been good at both. They're good at handheld, always. And interestingly, Sony thought, we kicked their ass in console with PlayStation 2 versus GameCube, and with PS3 versus Wii, even though the Wii was successful, PlayStation 3 was much better, and with PS4 versus Wii U, so we're going to kick their ass in handheld with PSP and Vita. And I don't know if you played on a PSP or a Vita, they did kick the shit out of a Nintendo handheld. Unfortunately, they never got software support, and Sony doesn't have the software capability that Nintendo has. So Nintendo dominated because they had the right price on their handheld. They made it powerful enough to play their software, and their software dominated. So I would say they are a software company first, a console company third, and a handheld company second. I would bet anything, and by the way, Nintendo told me this, way more than 50% do handheld only. Nintendo told me that, so I believe it. And I would bet that 90% do handheld primarily, and so very few people switch. So the point is, Switch is a gimmick. It's a really good handheld. It is a console quality handheld, and that makes the games even better. The screen is big enough, and the control scheme fits and works, and the software's great. So they are not a console company. What they did was they came up with a device that saved their dying handheld business. And their handheld business, they used to sell 25 million handhelds a year. They peaked at 32 million DSs. They sold an average of 25 million for 5 years between 2007 and 2011. An average of 25 million a year handhelds. Last year, I think the number was 6. So just so you kind of have perspective, they sold 125 million in 5 years, and they sold 6 million last year, and it's declining every year. So the Switch is their handheld, and it's going to do 16 or 17 million when they're done with the fiscal 19 year. So it's getting the mojo back, and that's at $300 versus 139 or whatever for the DS. If they cut the Switch price to $139, they would sell 25 million a year for the next 5 years. Easy. So honestly, I think Nintendo is a great software company with a great handheld that just happens to be called the Switch. Combining them both does mean lower revenue. Yes, they have lost the revenue from console and handheld. They are going to get it from one device, so yes, and I agree with you. The thing about Nintendo is that there's such a weak offering of third-party content on the Switch, and third-party outside of Japan. They have good Japanese content, but as far as conventional blockbuster console games, there's you just don't have Call of Duty, Battlefield, GTA, Red Dead, and probably you're not going to get FIFA anymore. Once it's off of old generation, there's just not the top sellers aren't going to show up on Switch, and so if you want to play the top sellers, you're buying a console as well. And so when you said many fans have bought both a console and a handheld, actually pretty much everybody who has a Switch, who considers themselves a real gamer, has a console as well. And when I say real gamer, I don't mean like Nintendo fans aren't real gamers. I mean, if you're a real gamer, you want to play conventional multi-platform games as well as single-platform games. So it doesn't make you not a real gamer if you have an Xbox and you prefer Forza and Gears and you don't play Last of Us and Uncharted, or Death Stranding, and vice versa. If you're a PlayStation owner, you love those games. Doesn't mean you don't want to play Gears, but I get not buying two consoles. But if you want to play Nintendo, you're absolutely going to buy a Nintendo console, which is the handheld. And if you want to play FIFA or GTA or Red Dead, you have to have a PlayStation or an Xbox. So I'd say, gosh, I'll bet at least half of Switch owners have a console, another console by either Microsoft or Sony, and more likely 80%, maybe even 90. Yeah, at me if you're an adult and you only have a Switch, and then explain to me why you have no interest in playing any games from EA or Take-Two or Ubisoft or Activision, because it doesn't make sense to me. That's it for this week's edition of Pachter Factor. I hope you are enjoying this on SIFTD.net as a patron on Patreon. It's only a couple bucks a month to get access to Pachter Factor early. We have about 50 episodes a year, so it's literally 50 cents an episode to get it early, and that pays the production cost. So if you can afford it, please do. If you can't afford it, link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account. That's actually $2.50 a month, and you pay nothing. Amazon pays it as part of your Prime subscription. So if you can afford it, if you can afford Prime, this is free. This is a free thrown-in service. Please take the minute it takes to link the two accounts. Instructions below. And once you've done it once, you can resubscribe with one click. So please remember, if you ever did it, to click again. We're actually seeing people drop off who have already gone through the effort. So just link again, pretty easy to do. If you can't do either of those and you really want to at me on my Nintendo question, just follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter. I will respond to anybody who follows me, and I will retweet if you give me a shout out on Twitter at Michael Pachter. Also follow Shane at Dinfire. Follow SIFTD at SIFTD Games. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.